Well, hey there, folks. I'm meteorologist Matt Barentine. We just got the latest numbers in for the 1 o'clock update of what is PTC number 9, which will become Helene here before too long. So it'll become Tropical Storm Helene probably by the end of the day is what I'm imagining. Right now, it's still a little bit disorganized. It's not what we call vertically stacked. So it isn't quite there just yet, but we anticipate that it will as it works its way off to the north, and eventually it's going to make a little bit of a turn to the north and west, and probably cut in between what we call the Yucatan Channel, between the Yucatan and the very tip end there of Cuba here over time. So let's check out the current numbers. These are the 1 o'clock numbers, still the same as the 10 o'clock numbers, 30-mile-per-hour winds, moving to the north at 6, still just off to the south-southwest of Grand Cayman Island. And they're not going to change the track just yet. We'll get a new track at 4 o'clock this afternoon. So this is the same track you might have seen earlier from the first one. Basically, it stretches from Destin to Tampa Bay. Destin to Tampa Bay. I know everybody focuses on the center line right there, basically right in about Keaton Beach area, Florida. But I always try to warn folks, you don't really want to focus in too much on that center line. And you got to keep in mind, most systems are fairly lopsided coming in. The more weather is on the right-hand side. So wherever it makes landfall and to the right is where the most drastic impacts are going to be felt, and they're not felt nearly as far on the west side. And we're going to be on the west side, so we're probably not going to see significant impacts if it makes landfall where the models are showing now. Obviously, things can still change, and I would like to see another full day's worth of models before I would take a breathe a sigh of relief in our area on this system. I'd like to see a little bit more. I'd like to see some more information from the National Hurricane Center, from the hurricane hunters, and all that. And we'll get more of that here as the day goes along. And like I said, each day that goes by, we'll get more information and things will start to become a lot clearer. But I'd like at least 24 hours more info before, like I said, we can say we're pretty much in the clear. Because it won't take much to nudge it a little farther to the west and then into our area. So this is the factors here that we're keeping an eye on. And the main thing, there's a little ridge here blocking for now. And then there's an upper low. And essentially what this storm wants to do is cut right in between these two things. As the upper level low will kind of cut it apart, and the upper level high is like a mountain. It'd have to kind of run over it. So it wouldn't be happy either way. So it wants to cut right in between. There's going to be basically like a highway right in between those two things where the system is going to want to cut. And that's why you see the forecast models putting it where they put it, which is somewhere around Apalachicola over towards Cedar Key, Florida. And those are the areas you can see painted in red on this graphic. Now, we're not totally out of it. That's why we are still in the, it says keep watch in our area. I don't want anybody to let their guard down just yet. All right, so here is, which model? This is the European model. And here it is cutting in between through the Yucatan Channel. Wednesday morning, gathering strength in the southern part of the Gulf of Mexico. It'll be basically full on. There's nothing to hamper it in the southern Gulf. Now, in the northern Gulf, there will be some wind shear that it will have to contend with. But the thing is, if it's strong enough by that point, that wind shear won't make a whole lot of difference before it makes landfall, likely as a major hurricane. And remember, every model I'm showing you is just one model. I'm going to show you several here since we have time as we record these. So this is going to go, this model, the European, is taking it up to around Apalachicola. In this scenario, we would likely get some rain bands in the eastern parts of our viewing area, say around Okaloosa County, Santa Rosa County, maybe even into around Pensacola, getting some significant rain bands. But I wouldn't expect any real significant, severe weather across our area if that was the case. And this one would be even less. This is the GFS, or the American model. Once again, it cuts it in between the Yucatan Channel, growing in strength, strengthening rapidly as it goes through the southern Gulf. We're probably looking at rapid intensification during the day on Wednesday, and then making landfall somewhere around Cedar Key, Florida. In this scenario, we may not get any rain in our viewing area at all if it goes that far to the east. I know the model here, the GFS, does show some rain in the Panhandle, but trust me on this when I say that would not materialize if it's this far east, because it's a very broad low resolution model, so it just happens to show rain there, but I doubt we would actually see any rain if it goes that far east. And let me give you another model. This is what we call the graph or the IBM model. And this one has a bit more resolution, but it will only go out 3 days. So you're going to see that it'll stop before we get to a landfall. But it shows a very similar scenario where we see a rapidly intensifying hurricane in the southern Gulf of Mexico, then working its way up the west coast of Florida. And what we would see from this, now once again, this doesn't go far enough to go to a landfall, but kind of gaming this out here on this model, it's probably similar to what we just saw in the GFS, which is around Cedar Key, Florida, somewhere up in this region. You would see these bands. Now, this would cause major problems all the way up the west coast of Florida. They would be getting very heavy rain, very gusty winds, storm surge as well. And then on the backside of all this, where we are at, you can see how the rain cuts off at around Panama City and does not extend much farther west. So we would get very little out of a scenario like this. I mean, we get some gusty winds, some rough surf, but very little otherwise. And here's another look. This is, again, the graph model. This time it's with the winds. And look at the intense winds around that center of circulation. That would be, once again, a devastating hurricane. And this also goes to show how the west coast of Florida, even where it doesn't make landfall, if it kind of grazes up the west coast of Florida, it could bring these hurricane force winds and spread them from Tampa Bay all the way to the north, maybe 100 miles or so. So that could be really devastating if it comes in at that sort of angle and, sort of rakes all the way up the west coast of central west coast of Florida. So that's going to be a very serious situation. But you'll notice too, look in our area, see these are just not even tropical storm force winds. That green color you see is tropical storm force. You see we just have some breezy conditions, but nothing like what they'd be seeing here. All right, so for us, things are quiet today. We have plenty of time to watch this storm. At this point, I would say, make sure you kind of go over your checklist, know what you have, and know what you might need. Now, you may not need to go get it the next couple of days, but, it never hurts to have all the things you should have anyway for hurricane season, because once this storm goes by, other storms are very possible, so we have to keep that in mind. It's going to be very hot today. Temperatures well up in the 90s, lots of sunshine for us. Now, here's what we're going to look at downline. Now, on this 7-day forecast, please make note, I've got 50% on Wednesday and 60% on Thursday. I'm kind of splitting the hairs here with this, kind of splitting the forecast. Like I said, give me 24 more hours tomorrow when I look at these numbers. If it's still that far off to the east, I'm dropping those rain chances in our area way down. We may get to the point where we don't get any rain. Maybe a couple of bands work their way through Okaloosa and Santa Rosa counties, and the rest of us stay dry. So I could be dropping those a lot. Now, obviously, if it's just back to the west, say around Panama City, those rain chances would go up. But my thinking is that they're likely to go down. So we could actually see pretty decent weather here. Sometimes when a system hits another part of the Gulf Coast like that, and we get those north winds out on the other side of it, sometimes our weather can actually turn out to be pretty nice. And that may be the case. Now, once again, I want to see 24 more hours of modeling before I get into saying all that. But that certainly is a scenario. So once again, we are going to be keeping an eye on what's happening with potential tropical cyclone number 9. We got the latest path is basically from Destin over to Tampa Bay. The center part of the track, rather than looking right at that line, when I want to look at these maps, it's just more like you got to kind of put a percentage on, where it's more likely to go. And just think of that center line as more like the higher percentage. But when you get to the edges of that forecast path, say over around Panama City on one side, on the west side, or Tampa on the east side, there's still a pretty good percentage chance that it could end up working its way up that way. So we want to keep that in mind, that it's not just the center that will get impacted by this. If the center comes in on the west side of this, that's going to mean bad news for everybody up here. If it comes in more on the east side, Appalachia Bay will be actually doing a lot better if it comes up the east side of this through Tampa Bay and crosses the peninsula. that would be a lot better for folks over there in the Big Bend region. So we're going to have to wait and see. Like I said, we're going to need another 24 hours or so of modeling, especially now that the models have a system they're focused on. They'll get better. The hurricane hunters are going to fly down there. They're going to drop their instrument packages down in there. And when they do that, that adds a lot of great data to the models. You can almost always, it's when you go back and you do what we call hindcasting, we look at what happens, you can see when they drop the dropsons in there how the models start doing better. It's pretty incredible, and it's the reason why they do it. It can be dangerous to do. It's a lot of work to fly into those hurricanes, but it actually adds a lot to our knowledge, our data, and it really helps so the models focus in on a more precise path. So we'll be keeping an eye on all this here at Fox 10. Thank you so much for joining me here. We'll be back here throughout the day and, of course, throughout the next several days as we continue to track what is right now potential tropical cyclone number 9. We'll get rid of that weird wording and we'll call it Helene very, very soon. Have a great day. We'll catch up with you soon.